For more reaction on the budget speech delivered by the Finance Minister, let's now welcome political analyst Lukhona Mnguni, who is joining us via video link. Lukhona, thank you so much for your patience and your time as we get your reaction to this budget and how we got here. Perhaps let's begin with the breaking news minutes before the Finance Minister, in fact, took to the podium and tabled that budget. The DA announcing it will not support the 2025 national budget in its current form. How do you view the DA's posture and the ANC's reaction thereafter, and what may it signal, do you think, for the GNU?
Well, I suppose that we've entered a place, anyway, good afternoon and good afternoon to your viewers, sorry. I think we've entered a place where the real contestation now is beginning to happen within the GNU. The DA is definitely fighting for its constituency, but also trying to, differentiate itself from the ANC and send that kind of message that it is fighting on the side of people. And I think that politically, it's also a political weapon that they are utilizing to ensure that they keep themselves top of mind in terms of what constituents are thinking about in various, communities. But I also think that it has opened up, and it did open up, as the Finance Minister acknowledged, that the resistance to the 2% VAT hike did open up a big conversation about areas where the ANC had not wanted necessarily to commit to over some time in the last, financial years. If you remember very well, at some point when Ntombi was the Minister of Finance, he spoke about this issue of spending reviews. He even spoke about our foreign missions, for example, and how much taking up on the
Lukhona, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but we are struggling to hear you there with that sound. But Lukhona Mnguni just giving us a sense and his reaction, political analyst there, following that budget announcement. But let's continue then to get, just analysis around this budget. We will continue to speak to various political parties. In fact, let's start with my studio guest with me in studio as we continue then to get reaction from political parties as well as political analysts. We've got in studio independent economist Ntombi Mbele-Thomo and Africa Mthimkhulu. He's a senior director at MaxProf. Thank you to you both and good afternoon to you. Of course, it has been an interesting event today. Finally, the minister having then tabled that budget. Ntombi, let me begin with you. I mean, the last month's 2 percentage point VAT increase has fallen away. It's now been replaced by a 1 percentage point increase over 2 years, bringing that VAT to 16% in 2026-2027. Just your reaction to this, and perhaps the change in tonality that we saw today from the Finance Minister, but just in terms of the reaction, particularly to that VAT increase then, 0.5 percentage point, and what its implications could be to the ordinary South African.
I think I must begin by congratulating the National Treasury team and the Minister himself. Really, really a tough budget because also, as you have realized, growth is around 0.6% that was actualized for the year 2024. And we had forecast at 0.9%. And so to be in the terrains where we've got 0.5 as a budget primary surplus is an indication of how tough the struggling in terms of what we really have to play around in our fiscus versus the expenditure that is required for the state. And so I think we must congratulate the Treasury. But also when you look at the VAT issue, I think because we had already had foresight that VAT would be the biggest issue and outcome of the 2025/26 budget, there was a bit of anticipation. Having started with the very high amount of 2%, I think it is still a big social hindrance for a lot of South Africans, particularly the middle class, because most of their salaries is already below what they're able to meet in terms of their basic needs, transportation to work, providing shelters for themselves, and being able to buy essential foods. And so stretching them with the 0.5% must have been a very hard consideration. Having said that, we understand that there could have been other spaces that Treasury could have played at. One could have even said the 0.5 could have perhaps gone towards the capital and corporate tax rather, but we saw it coming to South Africans. And so I think it is not easy for me as an economist to sit here and say the increase of VAT is one that's welcomed. Although understanding the very tough circumstances, I do think perhaps we could have looked at increasing, giving that 0.5 to corporate tax.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into the implications of that and what it means, to have raised corporate taxes, as an example. But there are concerns now that people will, have this VAT increase, but also from a personal income tax perspective, those are other significant, implications and charges. But let me bring you into this conversation then, Africa, as we get your reaction to. Let's engage on what and how difficult the minister had to maneuver in this particular budget. I want to actually bring in what he said in the beginning of his speech. He began by saying the budget proposes a bold and pragmatic approach, but that the bigger debate is simply on how to grow the economy. What for you do you think are just some of those key nuggets that he mentioned in the budget that speaks to growth?
For one, from a personal, social perspective, I think it did cover the part of exempting some goods when it comes to the lower bracket of our economy, the low-income households. But one thing that was a highlight for me is the public-private partnership program that he has legislated and given a framework which is going to kick in as from the 1st of June. That will be interesting to get to know. Because for economy to grow, we need your public partnership programs wherein the public sector comes in and partners with government for especially infrastructure development initiatives. And for this economy to grow, we need to really invest in infrastructure. Because without infrastructure development, we will really struggle to attract that investorship program. One thing that highlighted caught my eye, is the transport and rail allocation. We've been seeing this problem of trucks all over the roads and accidents, and our commodities being transported in the form of trucks from Mpumalanga, from Kathu and so forth. And that becomes, moving a commodity by trucks is more expensive than moving it by rail. So I really hope that budget, even though he did not highlight as to how it's going to be split exactly in terms of the rail and infrastructure, I do hope that a larger portion of it goes towards restoring our rail network and infrastructure so that we can be able to move commodities with ease and as safely as possible.
And Ntombi, what do you think about that injection in the infrastructure spending? I mean, he did say that it is a key pillar of a growth strategy. I want to, just for the benefit of our viewers, just give you some of the points that he made. He said public infrastructure spending over the next 3 years will amount to more than 1 trillion rand. The spending will focus on 3 sectors essentially: transport and logistics, energy infrastructure, as well as water and sanitation.
I think that's greatly welcomed, and to echo Africa's views, that's how you reinvigorate the economy. That's how, as in the economic model, you've got household spending, you've got investment, and you've got the very big G, which is government spending. And now we're seeing that the tone, as you mentioned, has changed. Previously in our budget, there was a lot of austerity on how to cut expenditure. But now you're seeing that they are understanding that at the root of the lack of revenue is growth. So that's greatly welcomed. And we know that infrastructure also has the ability to hire, or create jobs for the very largely unskilled population in our country, which is therefore dealing with the issue of the economic violence of, having people not be able to alleviate the poverty crisis that they live in. And so I think now we're starting to scrape around how to deal with growth and how, as an economy, to deal with the market failures that exist. And so I think that is really a steer in the right direction.
Perhaps a question for you both. I mean, the budget has finally been tabled. Some people calling it the 2.0 budget. It now has been tabled, but there is, of course, concern that it may not necessarily, be approved when it comes to voting in Parliament in a couple of months' time. What are the implications, Africa? Perhaps let me get that point out to you first, in terms of even market sentiments, perhaps even from an investor perspective.
course, policy direction is a cornerstone to running any economy or any country. Without decision making in this particular aspect would mean we are getting stagnant. Yeah. There's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of fear that exists, especially within the business sector or business community. So from an investor point of view, it will be difficult for executives or investment companies to really take direction or to take decisions at this particular point. Up until the compromise is reached, everyone finds a middle ground and we resolve on this matter. With a big emphasis, maybe a point that has not been elaborated too much on, which is building the state capacity.
Yeah, very quickly, Ntombi, as we wrap up, I just answer the same question. We were speaking earlier on where you were saying it does, in some levels, also indicate, positivity in terms of democracy at play. Yes,
this is a true nature of coalition. Anywhere else in the world, this is very normal. But quickly also, we must be very careful in our politicking within the GNU not to crowd out investment. Yeah. By that I mean by creating the fear-mongering of there not being a coordinated government within the national sphere of government. So that is a critical point, that within the constituencies and having to trade off, it does not undermine South Africa's governance issues.
Okay, thank you to you both and so much for your patience. Really do appreciate some of your insights. Those, of course, were our studio guests, just giving us their views, of course, following that budget address. Independent economist Ntombi Mbele-Thomo, as well as Africa Mthimkhulu, Senior Director at MaxProf.